Greetings, pairs, Robins, and retrogrades. Today, I bring you a special treat. It's a proverbial platter of bugs, and the topic is entomophagy. And joining me is the newly christened expert on entomophagy, my friend Jay Dyer. What's up, Jay? Thanks for joining me.
And I'm an expert because I just learned the meaning of that word about 5 minutes ago from you, actually.
Right.
So.
Right. Like 3 minutes.
I am not an expert in this topic, but I'm happy to pretend and sound as if I am. These glasses help. If I wear glasses, then it helps project the idea of expertise.
It does, like Lisa Turtle. You know, if you want to go smart, sassy, you throw on the glasses.
You can also scowl over them like a boomer does, like when they did the boomer scowl over the glasses. Right. It also projects authority. So
it does. Take them on and off as you pound your shoe on the lectern. Well, Jay, I know you as a smarty pants in Ortho Bro and Eastern Orthodox smart guy, and we've talked a few times before, and we've become very friendly over the last few months. But you appeared in an exciting documentary by Tucker Carlson Originals called "Let Them Eat Bugs," about the reality of entomophagy, bug eating, and the fact that this thing is coming down the pike as a centrally planned scheme, part of Agenda 2030. And right. It just debuted 3 days ago. So congratulations on that.
Thanks, dude. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. I didn't expect it to actually congeal and occur because I think Scooter suggested it some months back. And I told him, I was like, hey, I got a buddy, Primal Edge Health. He's really an expert on the whole food diet stuff. He would be great. But of course, he's in Ecuador, so that doesn't work out. So I said, well, I do know a lot about, the history of the World Economic Forum, and I've read Klaus's books and all that. So I can definitely speak to the topic, but I'm certainly not any kind of, expert on bugs or bug eating. But I did eat when I was dressed up as Klaus. This didn't make it into the thing, but I did eat a bug just to see what it tastes like. By the way, they suck. They're terrible.
Yeah. I had one of those hot licks on a cross-country trip like 4 years back, just out of sheer boredom, having driven 20 hours. And it's absolutely disgusting. It's exactly what you would expect, isn't it?
Yeah, it reminded me of, when you eat a peanut and the peanut has that flimsy sort of shell that it wears, not the shell, but the little flimsy, I don't know what you call it, the casing. Yeah. The underwear, the Peanuts underwear, it tastes like that, which is to say it tastes like nothing. So they actually put, a lot of flavorings on these, and the some of the best parts that didn't make it into it were when we went to the park in Austin. You saw a couple people that we asked, but basically every Austinite ate the bugs just by this guy Klaus walking up to them in a spacesuit and saying, and they all did. So it was like 7 out of 8 people ate the bugs. So really a brainwashed crowd. That's why we chose to do it in Austin. We thought about doing it in Nashville, but Austin we thought would have more weirdos. So yeah, and that demonstrates, I think, the attitude of the people in these, big cult-minded blue cities, where they all just work like a hive mind, and they do whatever they're told. And if they're told to eat bugs for the environment and for the earth, that's what I did. There was a lot of scenes that you didn't see where it's like somebody was like, I don't know if I should eat a bug. And I was, I'm Klaus. Would you do it if you get the universal basic income? I'll provide for your life. Would you eat the bugs? And they're like, yeah, if it's for the earth, yeah.
Oh, totally, bro. The funny thing is, I want to talk to you a little bit about normies today. The funny thing with the Austin Gym Bro that you talked to at the beginning of the film is conservative normies, or normies plus, whatever you want to call them. They will buy in, as they buy in to most everything, along with regular normies, until they realize that they've run foul of, I don't know, one of the leitmotifs, slightly firmer terra firma for skepticism, then which they actually know to be worthy of ridicule. You know what I mean? So when you were talking to that one gym bro, it was quite funny because he was like, wait, what? Like, yeah, I'll eat the bugs. Then you're like, no, but it's part of the WF. Then he goes, no. I know to hate them. So he's like, it's like firmer terra firma to actually put on your skeptical glasses, since we're doing that, and put on your peanut underpants and to say, I'm gonna reject this. And he joined you then, right? He must have been like the most conservative guy.
Well, the gym bros were the ones that were kind of halfway red pilled. Yeah. So they knew that when they heard what we were doing, they're, oh, you're with Tucker. Yeah. Okay. That's all right. And they knew that, this was making fun of Klaus. Then he was like, yeah, no, that dude sucks.
Yeah.
So they were the only people that were red pill, which I think speaks to, some degree, masculinity being left in the dude bros and them having some sense of what's actually going on. But literally everybody else at the park, I mean, it was like, multiple other, and we were very diverse too. Klaus was not in any way a bigot. He approached a diverse crowd of people at the park, and everybody ate the bugs. So
yeah, everyone except for that one guy. Well, even that one guy that you interacted with ended up eating them. I mean, look, so well, there are a couple things I want to get to, but first off, congrats, because this was exciting to see you in this wearing this other hat.
I didn't think we would do that, by the way. I proposed, Scooter and I were just kind of throwing ideas back and forth. I didn't think you would go for that. And I was halfway joking, like tongue in cheek. I was like, what if I put on a spacesuit, and I was and a bald cap, and we were, passing out. And I think he said, yeah, and you can go pass out bugs. I thought we were joking. Yeah. And then when he came to Austin, he's like, all right, I got the suit and the bugs. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. Are you going to put it on? I was like, yeah,
I guess.
I didn't think you were serious.
Where'd you get the suit, by the way, Scooter?
I think he just, or like he typed in probably something like weird karate gi or something like that. So I think it was like a gi, and then he just bought whatever he thought was like the best, eBay bald cap that you could get. But we thought it was even funnier because it wasn't attached correctly, because I got this lesbian wine ant hair, so it was kind of flapping in the back because it wasn't totally. Anyway, we just thought that was even better. That was more ridiculous.
It was. Well, it's sincerely good. It's always good to see a Christian breaking out. Not that
not coming out.
Yeah, not coming out. That's a whole other show. The whole other show. My audience knows you as a smart guy, and it was cool to see you. Tucker Carlson explicitly introduces you as a funny guy, a comedian, which is good, and it's a second approach to converting quote unquote skeptical normies. And obviously I use the term sparingly because normies are anything but skeptical, but you get the point. It's like you're throwing multiple modes of reception at the normies out there who will do anything, kick, claw, bite, scratch, to avoid realizing that they really are going to make you be eating bugs. So congrats once again. It was funny and well done.
Yeah, on my channel, it's something that we've always done. We've always done skits and weird, goofy stuff. It was just kind of something that I gradually started introducing because I wasn't as confident in whether it would work, maybe 6-7 years ago. So I would test the waters a little bit with silly stuff. And then just over time, I got more and more, I guess, comfortable. As you know, when you live stream, you get more and more comfortable with being who you actually are, rather than when you first started, you think that you have to report it in a very serious. And if you go to the old videos, it's all very kind of dry. And although some of the first videos we did were skits and all that, maybe 10, 12 years ago. But yeah, I think that satire is a really great way to, to wake people up. Everybody reads the Babylon Bee, and it's great. It's always funny. And that gets huge traction. And I think if you can, as you said, branch out into different domains, it really does help to wake up normies.
Yeah. So speaking of normies for half a second, there, particularly with the entomophagy issue, when it comes to them, their first reaction to the bug eating theory, which for many years was just a theory, it's really all too real. It's always why, isn't it? They go, oh, come on. Why would they have us do that? And in what other realm of investigation do you proceed to the most like formal or final question first? This is always the last thing even a criminal investigator tends to, is like motive, where it's like 2 seconds after you, Mr. John Q. Normie, learned that this is even a thing that's coming down the pike from the WEF goons. Now you want to ask me, before you just learned it's a theory, and now you're asking me to articulate for you the trickiest possible sine qua non of all, which is motive, not means, not opportunity, but motive. Like, Why do you think they do that? I think this happened once or twice in your on the street routine in the movie. Like they always ask why, don't they? Right away. It's like, well,
that's a really great point. I've never actually thought about that, but that would apply to any situation where I think now that I think about it, where people's worldviews get challenged.
Yeah.
I think there's an element of pride there. It's sort of like, well, I mean, I would have known about this if they were doing it because I'm a smart person, because I read, whatever. I read the sophisticated journals and publications that I would know about this. And it's weird because all this stuff is mainstream news. So it's not like it's in some fringe area. It's not like you have to read, scientific papers on JSTOR or something like that to figure out whether they're doing this. It's in a lot of mainstream publications, but I think that's a great point. And it would apply to any area, I think, where people's worldviews are challenged. Why shouldn't be the first question, right? There should be an investigation of what is the case.
Right.
And then you would maybe theorize on the motivations, but whether it's the case shouldn't be in question. But that's a great point. I don't actually know why, other than maybe people have a deep-seated fear that, hey, what if this actually is the case? And so maybe they have like a knee-jerk reaction to shift it onto the questions of why, an area of dispute that's a lot more difficult to prove, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's an intuitive sense that, like, we'll just ask about motive, because that's the most absurd. It's like, well, let's just establish, and I'm being you for a second with your glasses and the lesbian hair for the video. IJ Dyer will tell you why. I can substantiate till the cows come home that. And of course, I have some theories as to why as well, but those come after. Let's establish the whatness first. And they really fear this, don't they? I mean, I remember when it was I Will Not Eat the Bugs and Alex Jones, whatever that was, now ancient history, 5-6 years ago, wasn't it? And it's like, this was considered the most fringe of all the conspiracy theories, wasn't it? The entomophagy.
Yeah, I first heard of this from my buddy Tristan in Primal Edge Health. And I remember the first time I heard that, it was around the first time I met him. And he was talking about on his channel in probably 2017 and 2018. And even I thought at that time, I was like, that seems pretty, I don't know how that would really work. But yes. I noticed at the same time he was talking about that the same systems pushing that would be pushing veganism. And even in 2017, I was thinking a mainline push for veganism, that's a bit much. Maybe by 2025, but no, within a couple of years, Tristan was right. The Economist, all of these big publications, you had Jay-Z and Beyonce coming out saying, oh, we're vegan now. You get free tickets to our concerts if you're vegan. That was 2019 or 20. And then we started realizing that Bill Gates, Beyond Meat, Richard Branson, right, all these people who have Tyson Foods, they started doing this push for getting beyond meat, getting beyond dairy. And that's when we started realizing, Tristan was right. No, they're actually going to push this together with really radical movements like Extinction Rebellion. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're actually a think tank promoted and NGO funded entity particularly in the UK, and they're super radical. They tie together veganism with animal rights, and they'll blockade, they'll attack farmers, they'll blockade the freeway to disrupt, logistics for farm equipment and whatnot. So they're really crazy. And then we noticed in 2018, 19, 2021 that the vegan movement on YouTube was really getting pushed hardcore. And then it started becoming clear that the same people pushing all of that were also pushing the bug diet. And so the bug diet typically goes together with the vegan stuff. And if you know the background of the vegan stuff, and actually you could go all the way back to the ancient world, because one of the things that got cut in the scene was where I went into Plato, and how Plato has a lot of discussion of controlling the proletariat, the bottom of the pyramid, with certain diets.
Yes.
So I just think that's an older technique that ancient elites kind of knew about for mass control. And then to fast forward up to more recent times, as you know, we do on my channel, we do a lecture through the writings of the elite. And at least 2 or 3 of those explicitly cover modifications to diet. So just real quickly, I'll just mention Charles Galton Darwin in his book, The Next Million Years. So he's in the circles of the Royal Society, and Aldous Huxley and Bertrand Russell and all those guys. he's from the Galton, Wedgwood, and Darwin families, right? He writes a book called Next Million Years, and he talks about completely taking over controlling diets for the technocracy when they roll this out. And he wrote that in the 50s. Then we have Bertrand Russell talking about controlling and managing diets and GMOs and a completely manufactured fake food, basically, when the technocracy rolls out. He wrote that in his 1932 book, Scientific Outlook. And then lastly, there's also Alvin Toffler in the late 70s, early 80s. He wrote Future Shock, which is a Tavistock idea. And Tavistock's basically the premier global social engineering outfit of the UK. If you know about the last few years of the TRANS Skittles, that's all out of Tavistock, right? And so, for example, I think there's 1,000 families that were suing Tavistock last year for the TRANS stuff, to give you an idea of what we're talking about. Well, they do the same thing with trying to promote alternative food and diet. And this is all part of changing everybody's ideology and lifestyle to fit into the Great Reset technocratic agenda, right? So that's why Klaus, that's why all these people have all this money and investment into the bug diet, is because it's part of the Great Reset agenda by design. And Toffler mentioned that, by the way, in the 70s. He said, we'll try to promote and change everyone's diets. In Future Shock, he says, towards vegetarianism, and he says, we'll tie it to alternative lifestyles and to anarcho-socialist movements, right?
Wow.
That's what Toffler said in the 70s. And he was writing that also in concert with Stanford Research Institute. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book, Changing Images of Man.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, it's one of these key white papers that is basically about changing everybody's public opinion and consensus reality to fitting into this Great Reset model. So those are all real documents. And the more that I got into this diet element of it, you can see very clearly that. And Klaus talks about it in Fourth Industrial Revolution. I don't know if he mentions bugs, but he says that everybody's diets will have to be overhauled because you just can't have meat. You know, you're hurting the earth when you eat meat and when you drink milk, basically. So right. They say it.
The centralization element of this is obviously the central element of it.
Yeah.
And like you said, I saw at the very beginning of the video, just a shot of you with your big sticky notes and Plato's Republic. We talked about this a bit on your show. The notion that Plato and Aristotle go together like a wink and a nod is the greatest psyop in the history of Western civilization. Plato and Aristotle are not. Plato thinks you can predicate being univocally. He thinks you can predicate the good univocally. Aristotle laughs at these things. He believes in top-down government, like what we're seeing out of the WEF. He believes the state owns the child, not the father.
Right.
And it's really book 5 of the Republic where he is rolling a lot of this stuff out that is unfortunately remarkably similar at this point. You get it's funny. I wish you were doing the interview of the first bug food company guy, and instead it was someone else interviewing him. There are basically 4 hosts in this half-hour interview. Let them eat bugs that I'm talking to Jay about here today. But the interviewer asked I think it's called Insect with a Y, food prepare or whatever. He goes, so George Soros hasn't funded you? He's like, no, not yet. And he says it sarcastically, like, this isn't top-down centralization. We're just a company, dude. And then he goes, well, but the Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates are. And he's like, yeah, they are, which are like the other usual suspect. And then Robert Downey Jr., the Iron Man, is funding the largest insect farm in the world. So it's all top-down. And it turns out that without naming what we call the beer bug, the Mexican beer, not Dos Equis, over the last 3 or 4 years, for the normies who still believe that this thing was spontaneous and accidental, what about when they look to, okay, the bugs are part of the bugs line up the diet of the Great Reset. What's going on with the collapsed economy, the dollar, which is being collapsed right now, that goes along with the economic component, right? The euro, undoing Brexit, that goes along there. And of course, the big motivator across all of these categories is the earth worshiping environmentalism stuff. Just cook up the fear, and then we're going to have BlackRock and Gates and all these other companies buy up all the farmland. The farmers are really the first enemy, even under Stalin. How do people not connect these dots? Oh, and then, by the way, Klaus Schwab has books called Fourth Industrial Revolution and The Great Reset, and they were out before, December of 2019.
Right.
So how are the normies not getting it, Jay?
Well, I noticed under the comments, like when Tucker put up the trailer, and I was reading all the comments on the various sites where the trailers were, and then, kind of comparing who I see people here and there just sort of defaulting to this idea that there's no way that anything could be planned at that level. Yeah. So they'll just, they see it all as just like, oh, there's one damn thing after another. I had a history professor one time, and he was going through the different theories of history, and he was talking about the great man theory of history, and he was talking about the people's history of Zen and all these people, and then he got to the point that most historians just default to the idea that there is no guidance or consistency. There are no power players. It's just one damn thing after another. And of course, that's simply not true when we actually go and read very wealthy, powerful people in their own writings, the way they describe things. And so you mentioned the Republic. I'm glad you did, because I'm reminded that in Impact of Science on Society, Bertrand Russell, who again is in the circles of the Fabian Socialists, he's in the circles of the Royal Society, he's part of this steering committee of the Western Anglo-American establishment power structure. He says Plato's Republic is the model. And he says it's a technocracy. Now, a lot of people, they'll read Impact of Science on Society, and they'll say, well, in the first few chapters, he's being critical. He's saying that there might be a world government and that they might try to take over and control everybody. And I'm like, and they actually buy into thinking, see, he's a liberal. No, he's not. He later says in the book, if you get to the second half of the book, oh, by the way, we are going to have to get rid of most people. And we will have to have, for the good of the planet, for the crisis of the planet, because of human existence. So he blames the problems of the world on the masses. But by the way, he also says that the technology of being able to blow up everybody and kill everybody with bioweapons is a genius creation of the elite. So on the one hand, he's like, we're the great elite that have created these things that can kill everybody. And then he turns around and says, the danger of the weapons of warfare that can kill everybody show us that we've got to reduce the population down to a small number of elites. So it's like he blames people for what they do. Anyway, he says that Plato's Republic is the model. And by the way, every communist, socialist, dictatorship system has had Plato's Republic as their model. And that's a 100% verifiable historical lineage. You can find this. I think even Benedict the 16th wrote a thing many years ago I read, where even he was tracing the lineage of socialist communist lineage to Republic, and then to Joachim of Fior and to the Munster Rebellion, because Munster was also a communist. So there's a clear ideological lineage there that's not even really in dispute. And a big part of controlling society from that technocratic standpoint, as you said, controlling diets. So I just think that people have this default that they can't conceive of, and they don't want anything to be planned on a big scale like that, even though they'll admit and they understand that there's corruption at high levels. It's like, so you believe there's corruption at high levels in government, but you don't think corrupt people plan things. I mean, have you ever read about organized crime? I mean, they run criminal rackets for many, many years, and they plan things. They conspire. It's actually on the books, right? It's a criminal offense called conspiracy, racketeering and conspiracy. But you don't think it exists. And there's just this weird sort of, I don't know, blind spot where it's like, if you're at a certain level of CEO, or, if you're a Gates level or something like that, there's this blind spot that, well, they couldn't be involved in like a giant criminal conspiracy. No. Because they're CEOs and they're like, on the news or whatever. They're just more clever, I guess you could say, with, their criminal operations than, Tony Soprano is.
Right. Yeah. The normie refrain that I know you've heard a million times in your life, because I sure have, is, well, these vast conspiracies can't happen. In fact, my brother on this show said it to me. He goes, I don't think behind the events of the last 3 to 4 years, you know what that is, beer bug and all, I don't think there's like a Dr. Evil twisting his mustache behind. This is very early on. to his credit, but I was like, there's literally a Dr. Evil. He actually borrowed his damn suit. It's Klaus Schwab. He looks exactly like a bald German Dr. Evil 20 years later. And what they'll always say, those with the normie worldview, is I've just been in on a secret with 2 or 3 or 4 guys, and we couldn't keep that secret in this room, man. How are they going to keep a secret between like 1,000 guys all over the globe? And this is what they always say, right? And they say it with a little bit of sass, and they're cocksure about it. And you're like, because people that are 2 or 3 guys in your fraternity or whatever that couldn't keep that secret, they didn't have the means of hiding in plain sight. Hiding in plain sight is how you keep a secret across the globe, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it right there. So this is just a lack of understanding of several things. Number one, compartmentalization. So one way that secrets are kept, I mean, I always ask these people, like, do you not think that there are intelligence agencies or that there are militaries? Do they keep secrets? Do you think they keep secrets effectively? What about the U.S. military? Do you think that it keeps secrets effectively across the globe? Well, of course it does, right? We have bases all over the world, and there are secrets. There's bases we don't know about. So yes, there are secrets, and we all think of the Manhattan Project. Okay, so yes, it's true that eventually people figured out what it was, but the way the Manhattan Project was structured was that, and I know about it because I'm from Tennessee. We had people over at Oak Ridge in Tennessee working on it. They didn't know what they were working on. They would be working on a little part of something, right? And it was top secret. It was compartmentalized.
Yeah.
So they didn't know the overall project. So, and this is just a really naive kind of normie take to say, well, but why would they write about it if it's an overall plan? They wouldn't put it out there. Yeah. But this is what Tim's point is. Tim's point is, right, that hiding something in plain sight is a very sophisticated and effective way to get this through, because on the one hand, it's out there and it's open, and people brush it off because it's out there in the open, right? And also, I think they know that people are not going to go and sit and read these boring books, right? But if you read, for example, Zbigniew Brzezinski's 1972 or 3 book, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era, it's about technocracy. Because that book is what got him recruited into the Trilateral Commission. Kissinger and Rockefeller created the Trilateral Commission for him to run at a higher committee level, the secret state, so to speak, that exists in plain sight. And it's because that book was so sort of in depth in terms of its analysis of what was coming for the technocratic era. So in the 1970s, in that book, Brzezinski talks about Skynet. He talks about GMOs. He talks about mutating humans with GMOs and all kinds of nefarious chemical concoctions. He talks about weather weapons. He talks about ELF, VLF technology, all the stuff that people even nowadays think is, oh, it's crazy, fringe. It's in Brzezinski's book in the 70s. And so that's why he went to work at a high level for these people. And then, if you don't know, Brzezinski was running all kinds of Cold War operations. He's the one that was under Carter, recruiting and using the Mujahideen freedom fighters that would later become Al Qaeda. I mean, so he plays a huge role. He was there consulting throughout the entire Obama administration. So this is a very high level Kissinger kind of guy. And if you think that Kissinger, Brzezinski, don't call the shots, you're just out to lunch. You have no idea what's going on. And because they write in their books, right, and have for so many years, that's what's amazing to me. So what these people are positing from that normie standpoint is really just ignorance of actual power structures, how they run, how they operate, like intelligence agencies or the military. They operate with secrecy, right? And they compartmentalize the information. And they also know, as you said, that, over time, this information will come out. And so the best way to have this kind of thing going is to have public people that are part of private meetings that have a public face, but they also have private meetings, steering committees. And so in that way, it's like, you'll notice the same people that go to Bilderberg are the same people that go to the trilateral meetings. And they're the same people that are part of like the top, CEOs of the Fortune 100. It's the same people that go to Davos, the same people that go to these, and their meetings are private, but their operations and they have a public arm and a public media presence and propaganda. So that's how it works, and it's very effective.
Yeah, and if people are still out there scratching their heads, in skepticism. Think of the way that I'm trying to think of a way to codify the term. So think of WuTang, the laboratory that sounds like WuTang Clan, right? Think of the way that was controlled when that story broke. Yeah. That is at the genesis of events over the last 4 years. Think of the way that you goodly normies out there were managed. Once that story broke, that should have been the biggest story in the last 20 years since, I don't know, 9/11 or something like that. And it wasn't. I mean, it was sort of a big deal. And then it came and it first broke in March of 2020. And then it was silent. And I couldn't mention it on my YouTube channel, except with highly codified insinuations for the next year and a half. And then all of a sudden, it became okay to talk about it. And you wouldn't get thrown off YouTube for saying it in late 2021, early 2022. And they managed it and they just tamped it down, that this was like a leak. And still the normies assumed, even though it had been covered up, that this whole thing was had an anthropogenic beginning, right? Man-made.
Man-made, yeah.
Yeah, they were like, the normies are still like, well, that was a horrible accident. I'm like, why would you assume that at that point? You know, like, did you assume the Manhattan Project was an accident? So without getting too far into that stuff, which will get us in trouble here, it's incredible that the normies will always steal ignorance and naivete out of the jaws of Sheehanter or something like that. They'll always steal defeat out of the jaws of victory, where it's like, okay, you should be getting red pilled now. Yeah. They still won't. And even I'm reminded of the moment in Let Them Eat Bugs, the Tucker Carlson's original that we're talking about here today, where the chef, who seems like a nice guy, the Chinese guy or whatever, he goes, look, we're trying to normalize it instead of sensationalize it. Direct quote. He's just sort of like a pawn in the game. The other bug food preparers seemed delightful, like nice people. Like Tucker Carlson says, every one of the bug food preparers was delightful to the man. Tucker says something like that, but incredibly naive and ultimately part of the weapon apparatus of the evil Klaus Schwab types. How does this work? They're saying the diametrical opposite thing, Jay, than their masters are saying. Their masters are saying, we're going to make them, we're going to make everyone eat this instead of a steak. And the chefs are like, no, have your steak if you want. I just want to diversify your diet. How does this work? How do they maintain their naivete?
This is something Lord Voldemort himself talked about for so many years. And I think once you see it kind of in person, like you're talking about, you realize that is what's going on. It's that humans tend to default to thinking that, well, everybody else is kind of like me. And if I'm a, basic, nice dude chef, and, I have the best intentions for people, and I'm sure that Chinese guy does, then certainly everybody else does, right? So that there couldn't be people at a high level of power that are basically more intelligent Jeffrey Dahmers, right? That's the way I view these people. It's like, Dahmer wasn't as smart, right? He was doing really crazy, psychopathic, weird, degenerate, evil stuff. But he was doing it, in a $200 a month, ghetto apartment. And, he was letting the bodies rot and it was stinking up the whole place. And people finally figured out, because he was like chasing people down the road, trying to get them to come into his apartment so he could eat them. Right. I mean, it's like, he wasn't very smart about it. Right. I mean, he was a kind of a semi-smart person, actually, if you read about his military history and all that. But he was completely just, lunatic, demonically possessed, in my view, crazy guy.
Yep.
And he wasn't very methodical and smart about his evil. And, people hear about Dahmers and they think, oh yeah, we know the serial killer exists. We know there's really, evil possessed people out there, but it just can't be at the level of somebody who's a CEO. There's just this weird default to thinking, as we said a minute ago, that if you're a CEO, then you must be a virtuous, hardworking person. How else could you have gotten through Harvard if, And
you know what that is? You know what that is with Americans? It's the lingering Puritan work ethic.
Exactly.
Where that guy,
Puritan work ethic. Exactly.
If he holds down a 9 to 5, he must be a good person, because
Dude, I've had boomers say to me, literally, well, if you were so smart, they put you on the news, you'd be a Fortune 100 person. Yep. It's like, is that how you think that you get to be the CEO of, you know, whatever, Gates Foundation, Microsoft? You just be a good, virtuous person. That's what Sam Walton did. He busted his butt and pulled himself up by his bootstraps. And if you did the same thing, you'd be in that position. It's like, that's not how it works at this level. Okay? No, maybe right. If you want to, you can't, and there's a level to which that's true in America. You know, we all know that, yeah, if you work really hard, you can have a successful business, right?
Yeah.
But that it doesn't work that way for like becoming the CEO of a Fortune 100 company.
No.
You don't just work your butt off and get there.
Oh, and it's the topic for another time, but Baxter talks about the Protestant view of labor, which is really a bridge to quotidian grace that they don't have, that we do right through the sacraments. It's literally, he describes the image of a cobbler huddled lovingly over his labor of, you know, shoemaking. And this is particularly the Covenantist Puritan Americans' connection to daily grace, since they don't have it through the 7 sacraments. They get it through work. So if a guy's a CEO, he can't be Jeffrey Dahmer, Jay. He can't be. That's what they say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point. You go back to that Puritan work ethic, and I'm not a huge fan of Max Weber, but if you read the book, he does make a point there about this older ethic of the original founding father, or pre-founding father period, where they had this idea that the sign of election would be prosperity.
Sure.
Right? Not the spiritual virtues, but as you said, you know, monetary prosperity and so forth. And if that's the case, by the way, wouldn't that mean that like the most elect and blessed would be the banker, because like he has the most money and he does the least amount of work, right? So I mean, and isn't that odd that that's completely contrary to, like, you know, the first 1,000 years of Christianity's views about, and I think even Aquinas you know, is very critical of usury, because it doesn't serve the common good. It's really just a lazy, you know, approach to life by making money purely off of interest, which is just basically what the banker does. I know bankers do other things, but you know what I'm saying, right? This is the classic critique of this view. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. That's a great point.
So yeah, man, it's funny where we're just doing a little show about your Tucker Carlson's original, which just aired on Friday or Saturday. Let the meat bugs. There's a great quick view. People should all go watch this. It's only like a half hour, and we're surgically. I wrote some questions to get into helping you to unpack what you did there, and the fact that I was disappointed that they had you cast just as Funny Man in this. I'd have liked to have you interviewing a lot of the people that were interviewed by other people. Ava, the girl, I'm not going to try to say her last name, and a couple other interviewers did an admirable job, but I would have liked to have heard the Plato's Republic analysis, Dyer analysis. But it's funny because I'm just trying to unpack the food eating, and because it all goes together as part of Agenda 2030, I can't help but we're getting into all of these other areas. You know, we're predicating our analysis across the categories. It all goes together, does it not? I mean, like, let me play for you. This is Rosa Corey, who appeared in The Greatest Reset with yours truly, and she's actually recently died, and some people aren't quite sure how she died. But listen to the way that it's all tied together here.
United Nations.
Here she is.
United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. It is the inventory and control plan. Inventory and control of all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all food, all energy, all information, and all human beings in the world. And this is a plan that was agreed to by 179 nations back in 1992.
The important point is that, yes. But 3 people in a room, they can't keep a secret, can they? I mean, it all goes together. And now even the normies should have enough info to make the call, shouldn't they?
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually forgot about Rosa Corey. I read her UN book, I think back in I remember I was over at my buddy Hesher's house, and they had it. And we were staying with them for a weekend, and I read probably 40-50% of it just sitting there just because I was enveloped in it back in probably 2014, somewhere in there, 15.
Wow.
Yeah, I think she was way ahead of her time. And I think, Lord Voldemort had her on many times over the years. So that's actually probably where I first heard about this stuff was Lord Voldemort interviewing Rosa Corey. I'm gonna have to go watch that episode you're talking about. I didn't know she was in that one with you. I didn't. I know you had told me that you did one too. I just forgot. So now I really want to see it. But that's a great point. Like, it's not like nobody's talked about this, and it's not like there aren't. Like, C-SPAN used to broadcast. I found the old C-SPAN broadcast of Bush at the Rio climate summit. It's like 1991 too.
That's what she's talking about. Yeah.
It's super boring, but if you watch the speeches, it's like, it's exactly what you're saying. Like, they're literally saying in the speech, like Bush senior's up there saying it, all these other, global goons are up there saying it. And it's not like the UN changed their plans from 1992 to whatever till now. It's all there. And then Lord Voldemort the other day was just referencing a bunch of Kissinger things I'd never heard of. I wrote it down somewhere. Like, Kissinger was giving speeches at the same time too, saying the exact same stuff. And if you doubt it, I mean, everybody might have heard of something more public called State Department Memorandum 200. Are you familiar with that one?
I've heard of it. I think you and Frank and I have talked about it before. I've never looked at it. Yeah,
that's Kissinger's. It's his plan for the third world, but that's just for one phase of that's ultimately for everybody, right? And it's Kissinger's public plan, I think under either Nixon or Carter administration, on how to drastically reduce population in the third world. So it's very famous, and that kind of became government policy officially, I think in the 70s under Nixon via Kissinger. So certainly there was already, a dysgenics and population control attitude prior to that period, but that's when it was kind of on the books. Like so the government now publicly says, right, we've got to have this austerity population reduction agenda because we've signed on to the UN agenda, and it's just that when you got that 90s era with Bush, it's just becoming more and more public. So they do a lot of propaganda through fiction and movies and this kind of stuff to gradually warm people up to the ideas, and then the government class more gradually over time becomes more public about the agenda that was already decided a long time ago. So it's just Malthusianism from way long ago, gradually revealed to the public, and now it's just full on, like 100%. I mean, Klaus has Prince Charles come on his podcast, like they were doing podcasts on the World Economic Forum's website, prior to the coup. So right when the coup was going, I remember there was a podcast they did, like right when coup started, and Prince Charles comes on. This is our opportunity to utilize this pandemic for great reason, to change all of reality. It's time to change everything. Right?
Yeah,
he says in this podcast.
Yeah, at the beginning of what is it? Not the Greatest Reset, but Died Suddenly. They have part of that interview. Oh, and you got to see Died Suddenly too. Well, it's great film, and it's the same guys that did.
Well, are you talking about the clip where it's I forget the Duke of whatever that died, the one where he says, "I want to come back as a virus."
Yeah. Well, that's one of the clips from the first 5 minutes. It's just laden with all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's so. I just don't get how. I guess I can't believe the gullibility of the masses at this point. But look, is it true what Ava said at the end of Let Them Eat Bugs, that the farmer is always the first enemy of Stalin types? Because that's strong evidence that what's going on now is as bad as the fringe weirdos say it is, right? The nitrogen emissions excuse for destroying Dutch farming is wholly pretextual. Of course it is, right?
Yeah. So in the book Next Million Years by Charles Galton Darwin, he says that you can't allow something to the effect of you can't allow the masses to have farmland because that means you're self-sufficient. right? If you have farmland, you don't rely on the superstate. You don't rely on Big Brother, the nanny state. You have the ability to provide for your family and even exchange and engage in barter, with your milk and your eggs and your, crops or whatever, right? So absolutely 100%. That's a necessary attack vector. And in fact, both Bertrand Russell and Galton Darwin say that one of the most important elements of control for the technocratic elite is food. And so it's actually overlooked by a lot of people because we always focus on the government, right? Oh, the big government's stepping on my rights, and Biden's going to do this and Biden's going to do that. And certainly there is a danger of Big Brother by a government, but more subtle and more deceptive are two other elements in areas which the last 3 years have shown. One of those two is medicine. The medical element is a super important side chain for the super state to sneak in and and this was why Obamacare was such a big deal many years back. And this is also why COOF was a big deal for the takeover of medicine and insurance. And believe it or not, they're the global elite. I didn't even realize this until I read one of the goons of the global elite. What's his name? Fritjof Capra. He has this book. Mm-hmm. He's one of these super green goons. He has this book called Turning Point. And in that book that he wrote back in the early 80s, he said that the way that this new system will come in is not mainly through government or Big Brother. He says it'll come through medicine and pharma, right? Big pharma. This will be the real back door. The other side of this, the other elites say, is food. So big agra, big pharma. These are the key means by which the superstate is coming into play. And most people are focused on Biden, this kind of stuff. And that's just like Biden. Who do you think has more power, Monsanto, Pfizer, or Joe Biden? I mean, it's kind of like obvious if you think about it, right?
Right.
And the same with medicine, right? Like who has more, like big medical insurance conglomerates? Do you think they have more power? Do you think some random, AOC? Do you think AOC is really calling the shots? That's what's wild to me, is that people are still with the level of coordination in the last 3 years of what rolled out almost across the whole world. The whole world coordinating in this operation, and you still think that like AOC is calling the shots. Now, I'm not saying AOC is, she's obviously a goon, but she's not calling the shots. You know what I mean?
Well, it's like Twilight of the Idols, the most adorably naive view that Nietzsche had is like, oh, there's going to be this dawning. I disagree with lots of his points, but obviously he thought that there would be some red pilling of the folks. And we're right on the eve of the Twilight of the Idols. These people, AOC is one of the idols, even for conservatives, right? Joe Biden is one of the idols. Yes, it's more like something to burn in effigy. It's an idol that we don't like. But rather than waking up and realizing this is a old-fashioned Aristotelian few and the many problem, right? The few take power, and we're living in a kind of global version of Book 5 of the Republic. That I think is what's really been bothersome to me and many others over the last 3 or 4 years, is seeing that the world was forever changed. We woke up in a science fiction novel, right? You've been doing this a bit longer than most people with the conspiracy stuff. You're kind of one of the original gangsters there. And I knew some of the stuff, but not all of it. And I'm just shocked how many people are still hanging on to their idols.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you on that domain. Because one thing I noticed, I was reading we went through C.S. Lewis's space trilogy some months back, maybe 6-8 months ago. And when I got to the third book was the most interesting, because I didn't expect it to be so much about what we're talking about, right? Because C.S. Lewis actually, I believe, and Tolkien both heard about what the people at Oxford and Cambridge, these Bertrand Russell type circles, what they actually believed and what they wanted. So they knew that they wanted to bring in this technocracy. And in my view, my opinion, I think I'm 100% correct that Lewis and Tolkien were writing about the technocracy. I don't think there's any question about that. But my theory is that the Institute in the book 3 of the space trilogy is this technocratic group in London that wants to bring about this depopulation transhumanist, right? And it's called NICE, N-I-C-E. And it's that's funny because they present themselves as like humanitarians, but really they are serving demons, and the aliens are demons in the novel, by the way. And they basically want to kill all the humans. So one of the characters that's recruited into NICE is this guy named Mark. And there's a great point in the novel where Mark Stoddard, where he reflects on his path and why he chose to be recruited. And he always had this desire to go along, to get along, to receive accolades from men, and to feel important, he says, because there's a certain point where after he goes through a lot of this trial and he realizes that he works for a really nefarious institution, which I think kind of is the Tavistock Institute, basically. He has a conversion point, right? He realizes, he repents. He says, this was crazy. I've been wrong. And there's a great conversation they have where it's like, all of the evidences were there to show that this was a nefarious institution, that it was a global conspiracy. It was all out in the open. And there's the dialogue in the novel where it's like, well, why didn't you realize it? And he's like, well, all the evidence was there. He's like, but I guess I just picked and chose the evidence, and I interpreted them in a way that I wanted, that justified what I wanted to be the case. So I'm curious what would you say about the questions that you asked me? Because to me, that exemplifies how people interpret and choose evidence. So it's not just a matter of laying out the evidences, because if it was, then we would all be on the same page and realize that Klaus and the World Economic Forum are bad guys, and they're all publicly saying what they want to do. But why do you think people don't follow the evidence? And why do you think that they, the questions you asked me, what do you think?
Well, I would say it's a problem of the will, not the intellect, with most folks. They, as much as you begin leading them down a path, you can only take a horse to the trough. You can't make them drink. And you could say, I did this about 2 years ago with some of my best friends with the bug eating. Actually, it was the bug eating issue in particular. And I said, look, here's all the evidence that I have to this point. Here's some writings of Klaus Schwab. All this was laid out long before the coup. And, what do you think? And ultimately, I think it's an issue that they'll say, look, I'm not going to debate you intellectually, but their will is revolting against the idea that the narrative that's being trotted out day in, day out in the sports media, entertainment media, news media, school, grade school, university, government, military, everything, it's so univocal that can't be wrong. And so like there's an aporia here. There's an insoluble problem, but the will is still connected to the mainstream narrative. So I think the vastness of the univocity, right? There's one voice that they're hearing, and then you're just this lone dissenting voice. And you do have these stickler facts that are sticking in their craw. I think there's something fundamental that people just know. So I guess I just presented a case that maybe it's partly intellectual, right? Ultimately, I would say this stems from achadia, a kind of spiritual sloth, where people, if they're not holy, they can't conceive of the notion of evil in its true conception. So ultimately, they're like, okay, I mean, this one guy who's presenting hard facts, for him to be right, there would have to be real evil. And so it's difficult to get to. So
if they were to admit that there was real evil, this might require, other things in their life to change, right? They might be forced to other conclusions. I think that you're making a great point there, that we start to see if they start to admit something like that, maybe they subconsciously realize, hey, wait a minute, maybe I believe a bunch of other crap in other areas.
Right.
Maybe I believe a bunch of other lies. Maybe this would require my whole paradigm collapsing or something like that. Other question I had for you too was not putting you on the spot. It's just something that I hadn't realized until recently because I haven't read the laws of Plato. So I read Republic a couple times through back in undergrad, and you see early on, I'm going from memory, maybe book book 3 or 4 where he introduces the secret society that will govern the republic with the noble lie. Right. It's almost like there's this inner council, and then we have the philosopher king. But it seems like by the laws, he comes up with this. Have you heard of the nocturnal council?
I haven't. No.
Okay, so by Plato's laws, he seems to change a little bit from what he had in Republic. And in the laws, it's this society called Magnesia. And Magnesia is basically the Republic, but it's sort of like he reformed it. And this is crazy because as I was reading through the characteristics of the Council of Night, it's like he's kind of shifted away from one philosopher king to like an oligarchy who only meets at night so that they can meet in secret. Right.
Wow.
And the oligarchy that meets at night, they have these rules about recruiting new members. And you have to be a certain age. You have to have certain qualifications, criteria. And it even goes so far as to say that certain Council of Night members are sent out to do espionage and intelligence operations. This is a deep state.
Yeah.
So he's literally saying by the time of Magnesia, the later of the laws, no, society actually needs to be run by a secret society. But there's a kind of a front government, right? Where it's like, oh, there's these people that are out there running things in the front, but there's actually an inner core of secret people. And it's amazing to me because later on in the Western power structure, mid 20th century, 50s and 60s, they start referring to the people at the Kissinger, Brzezinski level. They're called the wise men. And so they're basically kind of this oligarchic elite that I'd never even noticed, like actually matches up to the Council of Night and Plato. So I really do think they have what some writers have called a syndicalist view, where it's like the real power structure, which the British Empire had with the Milner Fabian Society. It's this inner group that has an outer structure of what they call the Society of Helpers. The Society of Helpers is like academics and people at universities and MIT and this kind of stuff, Cambridge and Oxford, but they're actually serving a very nefarious oligarchical inner structure. I just never realized that's actually in Plato too.
To me, I'd heard that. I have to read for my doctoral comps. I have about 24 books I have to read, works of philosophy over the next 6 months, and which I actually kicked back by a semester. And the laws is the other Plato text I'm going to do. I've covered 2 chapters from it. I did know that there is this deep state pitched in laws, and that's by the way his mature political philosophy than the Republic. So it's what Plato, quote unquote, really believed, but it's concomitant with the Republic. And I would say it's interesting what you told me earlier, that there is a tight bibliographical connection to all of the world's autocrats and their love for Plato. And I've always found it at the level of philosophy, history of philosophy academics, just strange to tie Aristotle and Plato together at any level.
Yeah, the point here being, so if people have a problem with the notion of a secret shadow government, it just shows to me, well, you're not even familiar with like the most formative text in the history of Western philosophy, right? Like Plato, right? I mean, so there's no grand conspiracies. Meanwhile, one of the most famous philosophers is literally saying, run the world government or the city state or the republic via a secret shadow society. It's like, no, this is really what goes on. You look at the British Empire, look at Freemasonry, the British Empire, and this is mainline history. I always pull this out with this is not a history or conspiracy. This is a historian. So Jessica Harlan Jacobs, she wrote this book, University of North Carolina Press, and it's about how Freemasons historically were the intelligence apparatus of the British Empire. That's what they became. I know that's not their origins. I know about medieval Catholic worker guilds. No, by the time of 1700s to up to the 1920s, the global Freemasonic operation is essentially, not everywhere, but mostly a kind of a adjunct, a kind of an intelligence network for the British Empire. So why would it seem strange that we know the British Empire existed? Did it have Masonic lodges everywhere? Yes. Okay, what is that? Is it nothing? It means nothing? Or is that, as historians have noted, is it really just a global intelligence structure? Of course it is.
Wow. Yeah, that's
But secrets and conspiracies don't exist.
Yeah, no, I think that's good because, you know, everyone picks on that Alfred North Whitehead quote that all philosophy is a footnote to Plato. And most Americans who don't know any philosophy know, you know, you ask them what's one philosopher, they're going to say Plato. All of Western civilization is a footnote to Aristotle, by the way, not Plato, but they know that he's real. And if you ask, well, what's one text of philosophy to some moron on you know, some quiz show, they're going to say the Republic. And the Republic, together with, like you're saying, laws, which really more narrowly adumbrates this structure of an intelligence state. But it's there in book 5 of the Republic
absolutely.
too, which is book 5 is really specific, people. He says you cannot, the common person should not be able to procreate. This is a right of the guardians and the class underneath the guardians, and that they should be taken from the home, and and they would be put in a state nursery, right? This is what kindergarten was. The idea of kindergarten was given to us by socialists. This is what, if you look at the University of Chicago, John Dewey, he was just doing book 5 of the Republic. That's what a curriculum is. He says, oh, this is going to involve sometimes, because a state nursery, a lot of times people won't even know biologically who is their kid. Correct. Siblings won't know who they are. So a lot of times it'll be incestuous relations. Plato says, no big deal. This will actually keep the stock even purer. It's horrific stuff. And I've always said, this is a 5-alarm fire. This is weird that Plato is being pushed as a great of Western philosophy, of Western civilization, alongside Aristotle. I don't get it. In his
Platonism is Illuminism, right? It is the idea of a secret inner Illuminati, so to speak. And if you go back to Weishaupt, I'm not talking about conspiracies, but the actual history of Adam Weishaupt and his secret society, the Bavarian Illuminati. They were all Platonists. They thought that, I mean, they had some other Gnostic and esoteric influence as well. And Illuminism was very popular amongst the nobility and the merchant class. And so it's kind of a noble merchant class rejection of throne and altar, because the idea was I can kind of have just this direct illumination via nature. And so it was basically nature itself becomes the manifestation of the divine. And there is no supernature. There is no beyond. It's just purely nature. The forms that it presents to me, I intuit via my innate powers, so to speak.
Right.
And so that's actually what the Illuminati is. And that's what influences the French revolutionaries and all that. And that's why they have the goddess reason, right? The goddess reason that they, enthrone in Notre Dame Cathedral, all this kind of stuff, which was a whore. So they wanted to defile the altar on purpose because they were basically just worshipers of reason. Anyway, long story short, it reminded me of another thing I just recently was looking into, which is I did a talk yesterday on Tavistock. And I'd gotten deeper into Tavistock than I knew about it. I read one book on it from Daniel Estlin, but I got deeper into it this last week for this talk. I didn't realize that, and this will tie into your question about why are so many normies just sort of defaulting to these silly positions, even in the face of all the evidence. Well, it turns out two figures at Tavistock, John Rawlings Rees and Dr. Kurt Lewin. And Dr. Kurt Lewin was part of Frankfurt School. They pioneered this strategy of groupthink and consensus reality and opinion polling. So nowadays, opinion polling is not as important as it was back in 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. But back at that time, they came up with the idea to just have fake polls. And they did a lot of studies on how people operated with being told that, well, the majority of people side with Jimmy Carter's blah, 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 right? Which wasn't even necessarily the case. But they figured out that most people would default to what they were told was the majority opinion, because they wanted to go on, get along, and feel like they were part of the club or whatever. So they actually figured out how to 100% manufacture, through the techniques of Bernays, through the techniques of Walter Lippmann and all the admin. And by the way, Walter Lippmann worked at Tavistock as well. How to manufacture consensus reality through everything from studying warfare to studying psychological operations to studying advertising. And they put this into basically a coherent package of perfecting through scientific technique, controlling mass consensus. And that's the world that we now live in, which the internet, and I'm not saying the internet might be ultimately a bad thing. I don't know. But I mean, for right now, it's there. It is what it is. That's why there's so much of a reaction. And I mean, I think Trump's kind of silly, but one thing he did was sort of shake up the media control, right? Because he constantly was questioning the media. And this is why they were so mad at him, was just over that, I think. It's not because he really did a whole lot otherwise, but he questioned the consensus reality. Elon taking over Twitter, whatever you think of Elon, like they're mad about it because it's questioning consensus reality. And that's all stuff that Tavistock perfected. And it's so scientifically perfected that it's just like basically mass brainwashing. It's a mass cult that people don't want to exit. And they're fearful. They're afraid of exiting the consensus cult, basically.
Which is why it's so important. The real hook is in I'm thinking of Let Them Eat Bugs, the scene, all the many scenes where it pans to popular morning shows with pretty ladies or whatever, hostesses trying the bugs and not saying, oh, this is delicious. Nicole Kidman, Kelly Ripa,
great example.
Saying, oh, this is gross, but getting used to it. They're modeling the behavior, and this is the real exquisite hook in the science of brainwashing, right?
Yes.
Well, this pretty lady's trying. I think of Bernadette Peters, right, in The Jerk, where she and Steve Martin's like, there are snails on her plate. Get them off now. They're at a fancy French restaurant. Well, pretty lady like that doesn't eat snails. She doesn't eat bugs. Pretty ladies are grossed out. They'll say ew. But no, if these pretty ladies are willing to try it, then and kind of bear with it, be forbearant. Well, I guess I should too. It's genius. It's diabolic genius.
Yeah, the celebrity culture, that was all engineered. I mean, obviously there've always been celebrities and famous people, but people don't realize that celebrity culture was studied as to how to weaponize it. And I'm sitting here talking about Rees and Kurt Lewin and consensus reality, and I didn't even think about the fact that the most obvious example would be Nicole Kidman and Tony Stark, basically sitting there and eating bugs to warm you up to, I want to be like Tony Stark. He's so cool. He's Iron Man. Ooh, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, perfect example.
Right, but show. I mean, the incrementalism, right? I mean, this is how Catholics with Francis and the group in Catholic circles that gave us Francis have really cooked us slowly, boiled us slowly, frogs in tepid water at first, and incrementalism.
Bugs in water being boiled.
Works. Yeah, bugs in water. It's by at first being like, look, we get this. This is not going. This is you're not going to like this at first. We're totally with you, people. We're totally with you, people. Even in constitutional ratification conventions, you see this position swapping. Mike Rappaport, when I was RAing for him, he pointed this out to me. When the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists were debating an Article 3 provision, which gives federal judges a lot of power, or an Article 1, Section 8 provision, which gives the Congress a lot of power that formerly, the police power the states just had, that you'll have the Federalists saying, in Richmond, in New York, in Harrisburg, all the big three capitals, saying to the Anti-Federalists who are skeptical of all that federalized, centralized power, dude, this is not going to centralize all the power the way you're afraid. It is. This is why we want you to help us ratify such and thus measure, but it won't do anything. You'll still have your states' rights and your local power. And the Anti-Federalists are going, no. They're banging their shoe on the table saying, no, you're going to roll up all the power. You're going to federalize. Well, then if the measure passes, as the Constitution did by a mere vote of like 89-80, in the most important state, Virginia, then all of a sudden the Constitution is a thing. We have La Cosa Nostra. We have it. We've reified it. And suddenly then you have the Anti-Federalists going, okay, well, you said that you're not going to federalize the power. And the Federalists are swapping to the other position. They're saying, okay, you said it will centralize all this power. Now we have a thing. There seems to be that little, UTEP two-step kind of dance that happens at the level of basic human psychology with celebrity culture, where they're like, well, the celebrity said that it's gross, so I'll try it because I want to be like whoever that I think is
But
glamorous.
now the idea has been introduced.
Right. Now the idea has been introduced. Boom, incrementalism. Now there's no going back. You know, this nice Chinese chef guy said, you can keep your steak if you want. I just want you to diversify your diet. And it's not going to be him that stands over there and says, now you have to eat it. 5-10 years later, it's going to be the government. Same thing. I think Chesterton says this about the devil. The devil's the one that tells you, hey, go ahead and do this sin. Like Jesus, he's judgmental. He doesn't want you to have fun. But upon your death, it's going to be Jesus that said, you did the sin. If you repented for it, it's fine. The devil's going to be the one accusing you. So it's very basic to human psychology, the kind of two-step flip, you know?
Yeah, it was also something that the Fabians noticed, right? They noticed that the best way to bring about revolution when the first phases of Marxism didn't work, when the workers didn't rise up because they weren't sitting around debating all these abstract neologisms that Lenin and people were coming up with, the workers were concerned with when's the break time, right? They're not concerned with debating like, means and modes of production or whatever. So when the workers didn't rise up, you had what was this movement of reform Marxism. And the idea there was, look, we're going to have to ally with the existing institutions and monopoly capital, or we're never going to get anywhere. And that would seem to be a much more effective way. And as you said, that's the Fabian slow kill model. And then actually the Frankfurt School guys studied this too, when they got really deep into studying how you move the Overton window. And another example of this is what I mentioned earlier. Your examples were great in the Tucker special. I didn't even think about it. But I mentioned Extinction Rebellion earlier, which is radical, right? They're perceived by the masses to be radical. Mm-hmm. But one thing that really radical groups do, and they do this by design, the people who are above them, much smarter than the low level, purple hair people, eater freaks that are on the street. The smarter people that are handling them, they have them go out and do radical action. Because what that does is it moves the window, right? So like if somebody goes, like what the vegans will do, or the Extinction Rebellion people do, they'll go and slash the tires of all the tractors on a giant farm, or they'll go and free the lobsters at the seafood restaurant or something. I don't know, something ridiculous, right? And so, and there was one girl who was doing this, and she was like going, and when people were going to get the lobsters, and like she stands up on the table at the seafood restaurant and starts screaming, and she screams for an hour, and they have to call the police and get her. So that's perceived to be radical, but what she's done is introduce the idea. What shutting down the farm has done is introduce the idea that, hey, there's radicals out there, and if there's radicals calling for it, maybe we got to make some concessions. Maybe we got to find a middle road, but it's all completely manufactured because the goal was to get you to the middle road. And then the next radical moves it this further. Now the middle of the road in 20 years is what the crazy chick was doing, screaming at the seafood restaurant.
That's exactly right.
And it's that's a study technique. Yeah.
It's Achilles in the hair. You just keep having the have. And are you familiar? I'm not sure if the algos will F me up for saying the term, but I'm too curious. Are you familiar with the term bio-Leninism, Jay? I probably shouldn't have said it, but
bio-Leninism, no.
Bio-Leninism. Look it up. It's what they do. They get the freaks on the street, or maybe recent escapees from the mental institute to do the extreme stuff, to free all the lobsters at Red Lobster.
Which is funny because they got rubber bands and they can't move because
exactly. I used to call them my friends when I was a 3-year-old at King Super. I'm like, Mom, I want to visit with my friends. She's like, I got to get Tim some real friends. But the point is, like, the normie looks at that and they'd be like, why would the left, why would our masters do that? Why would they show 12 years ago, who's the survivalist British guy that used to go out there, that survivalist? Bear Grylls. Yeah. They'd show him eating bugs, and everyone, before they even rolled out the plan, everyone would go, that's disgusting. He takes a bite. You have a shot of it in Let Them Eat Bugs, and the guts explode everywhere. At first, they join you in your revulsion. At first, everyone, even moderate leftists, will join you in your revulsion. I'm a leftist, but I'm not a woke leftist. I'm not one of these purple-haired freaks. I don't believe in slashing tires or freeing the lobsters at Red Lobster. But they're incorporating They're slowly enculturating and incorporating the ideas of the leftists. And like you said, they're having the haves. They're showing Kelly Ripa at first be grossed out, but then less gross. This is just kind of like eating a shrimp, isn't it?
Is it bio-Leninism?
Yeah, bio-Leninism.
Okay. That reminds me of, remember Heidi Fleiss? Do you remember her?
Yes.
So she was like, this Hollywood madam, right? And she had this black book and all this stuff. I remember reading an interview a few years ago with her, and she made a really oddly insightful point where she said that where we are today with like only FANS and all this stuff and TRANS and all this stuff, she's like, we couldn't have gotten to where we are now with all that if you hadn't had the mainstream media going crazy with Bill Clinton and his cigar and the Heidi Fleiss story. So she said, I didn't even realize that my story coming out like completely changed people's attitudes towards, in America, towards like, Prost, and the Clinton stuff. She's like, so it interjected these ideas, which were seen as, immoral at the time. But now where we are, that's not even a big deal. No, that people don't even bat an eye at that stuff. And so even she was perceptive enough to notice that the discussion and the focus on all the craziness that she talked about was enough to kind of move the window up until our day.
Have you ever read After the Ball, Jay? About how they would roll out Skittles? They say, look, don't. I think it's from the 80s, late 80s. Don't introduce Skittles Rainbow as a good thing. That's too large a dose. Just roll it out as just another thing. So you start out with one person in, every other sitcom episode. And then after a little bit of that, that's just a person, they don't have to be the most admirable character in that episode. Then make it one person per episode. Now it's like 3, right? But make it just another thing. It's too much.
Remember when Will and Grace was a big deal because it was one of the first main characters with that Skittles dude. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, it's I think they would begin even a little further back on the morphology of revilement, and in terms of capturing the normies' hearts and minds. If there's a mind in the normie at all to speak of, capturing the hearts anyway of the normies involves, let that character be a subject of revilement and opprobrium at first, then start making him be just another thing. And now usually one of those characters is.
Yeah, you're right. Because in Will and Grace, that's like a positive portrayal. So there would have been probably earlier introductions. And then you gradually, another thing they do is they make nowadays, especially like those are the characters that are the strong heroic figures.
Yes.
It's always, they're the rational, sophisticated, cultured, everybody else, and the Christians basically the TERRORIST, right? They're the crazy, serial killer he had a Bible and he was a serial killer, right?
Always. Yeah, he was a weirdo. He led a cult. He had a view that women shouldn't be in sports. It's like, they shouldn't. I mean, 10 years ago, it was like, yeah, dude, the WNBA, that's hilarious. Now I go to NBA games and I got guys that are knowledgeable about basketball that have bought that psyop, which is also an Agenda 2030, by the way, women in pro sports.
That was designed by Tavistock, actually. Tavistock a long time ago came up with the idea, to put women, just to get women focused on men's activities, because that would contribute to they wanted to feminize men and masculinize the women, and that would contribute to the less likelihood of pair bonding and having families.
Of course. Yeah, it's fun. That doesn't surprise me at all, but it's nice to have that line item. But it's actually there, a couple paragraphs in Agenda 2030. But I'm like at a New Orleans Pelicans game, and I'm talking to a dude that's somewhat knowledgeable. Both of us coached at some point in our lives, and then all of a sudden he's like, "You paid attention to what's going on in the NCAA women's tournament?" I was like, "Are you joking? Of course not. Why would I give a damn, bro?" And then
nah, dude, I only watch women's ping pong. That's all I watch.
Yeah.
I follow one sport, just women's ping pong.
Yeah, it's fantastic action. Well, I tell you, man, this is It's always good chatting with you. This has been about a lot more than nitrogen emissions on Dutch farms, hasn't it? And then quote unquote ostensible need.
Well, that Dutch element towards the end actually demonstrates that, hey, wait, this is not just people conspiracy theorizing on the internet. They actually were moving to shut down farms. Exactly what everybody, you know, talks about with Stalin,
right?
Holodomor. And by the way, what the Bolsheviks did the same thing too. Like they tried to just seize everything. Like it's not rocket science here. It's like just take the stuff. That's it.
Yep. There's a great line in my favorite movie, Thin Red Line, directed by the Hollywood's oldest crypto Christian, who where Sean Penn said, they're talking about World War II. They're at Guadalcanal, and he goes, the whole effing thing's about property. The whole thing's about property. And it's like it's really basic. You know, scare people to the smart cities, these bug men, where they can live in a 6x8 smart pod and eat crickets. And they'll take all the land, BlackRock and Gates and all the other ones. And the final push, we don't have time to get into it now because I'm trying to wrap up, but the final push will probably be martialize the military for our protection because of the fake aliens. Do you remember the day, Jay, we're about the same age, when the weirdos were the ones that believed aliens were real? Now you're a weirdo if you say they're fake.
I do. Yeah, this is another side sort of like I've got over here. Do you remember the Illuminati card deck? Have you ever seen that?
Yes. Yeah.
I've got mine over here, and I always just kind of have them for fun. I mean, I don't think that literally whoever wrote this like runs the world. It's not this. It was just a game that guy came up with, but that guy did actually have some pretty wild connections. The guy that Steve Jackson or whatever that created it, and it is illustrative because it's like, you know, there's all kinds of cards that can be played at any point, right? So do I know for sure if they're going to use the stage alien scenario? I don't know for sure, but I do know that there are a lot of these kind of plans and things that they can roll out, as we saw in the last 3 years. Things rolled out, which were war gamed in at least 6 different exercises prior to the last 3 years, which I've covered ad nauseum. But I think that that's absolutely one of the things that could be rolled out. We've covered it many videos over the last several years. We did, in fact, a couple of years ago, we did Alien January, where we just went through all the alien propaganda, all these dumb alien movies. And the aliens are typically either demons or they stand for the elite, right? Because what do the aliens want to do? Oh, we got to depopulate. Oh, we got to have a world government, blah, 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 blah. Worship us, and then you'll have utopia, all this kind of silly stuff. And you see it particularly in, you know, Childhood's End, right? Arthur C. Clarke, actual Satanist, right? Buddy of Crowley, writes Childhood's End, where the alien visitors come and they want your children. Give us your children. We'll give you medical cures, and we'll save the planet. And by the way, at the end, they nuke the planet, right? So it's always about nuking and depopulating. Same thing in 2001, right? You got to depopulate. The real story is that Star Child nukes the planet, by the way. So yeah, I think that they've got cards. They could roll out all kinds of things. Like they could roll out the let's throw down a Sam Bankman-Fried here with offshore banks and crypto. Let's throw down let's throw down an alien face stage alien invasion. That all that could happen. I think that they will study to see. In my view, they're going to study and see like at what point public opinion accepts, you know, alien existence, and if a majority, a giant portion do, which there are studies that have tracked this. Like I think in the 2000s it was pretty low, the people that believed in extraterrestrial life, but I have seen recent polls and study where they claim that it's, you know, 70-80%. Of course, polls can be manipulated. Who knows? That's true. But I think we could see, you know, they could roll out a cyber pandemic, cyber polygon, which Klaus has exercises that they've done. I've covered that. That could roll out. They could roll out that stage alien thing, like you said. And by the way, that's in one of the World Economic Forum videos. That famous one that's like 8 things to expect by the year 2030. One of them is the discovery of alien life. Is it?
I didn't know that. Yeah, I'm not surprised. But
it says the possible discovery of alien life, to be precise. Yeah.
Right. Wink, wink. Jay, you're one of the most interesting guys to talk to, and thanks for joining me today. People go watch "Let Them Eat Bugs," the Tucker Carlson original by written by Tucker and our mutual friend Scooter Downey. Did you have anything you wanted to close? I'll give you parting shot, Jay, or shout out anything you're working on. You always got a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah, one thing I would promote is that we're doing a live event with Jamie Kennedy from Scream, Jamie Kennedy Experiment, super funny dude. So we've been doing live events lately, and this one will be in California. So July 6th in California, you can get tickets on my website or at the Eventbrite, or if you go to my channel and under most of the videos, you can see that you get the tickets to that. As I've said, July 6th in LA. It's going to be a lot of fun. We actually do like a 5-hour presentation on everything. So we cover philosophy, we cover Hollywood, we do silly stuff. It's all part of a big kind of, it's like a daily party. So we've been getting good crowds to our events, 100, 120 to most events that we do. So get tickets to that if you want to come. The other thing I would say is if you want to watch the Tucker special, you have to, if you go to the trailer on my channel, it's at the top. You click on the link to Fox Nation, and then you have to use that promo code, and it'll let you watch the full Tucker special. But other than that, all my stuff's at my website and on all the socials under my name.
Cool. All right. Well, that's everyone should go watch this thing. Let them meet bugs. Go out to California. Jamie's an interesting guy. He's reasonably red-pilled?
Well, he still operates in the domain of Hollywood.
Yeah.
So he, a lot of things he doesn't say, but I get the impression that he knows what's going on. I would also forgot to mention too, there is a Nashville event. June 3rd and 4th. We'll be at a huge Nashville event with a ton of like 20, 30 other people, musicians, speakers, people from Lord Voldemort's circles will be there. I can't names you can't mention on YouTube. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's June 3rd and 4th in Nashville, and you can get tickets to that event too on my website.
Okay, cool. We'll go check out Jay's website, everyone. Oh man, obviously subscribe, click the notification bell on this video. People, thanks for tuning in. On Wednesday, we have a great show for you, another interview. For now, go and watch Let Them Eat Bugs. And thanks again, Jay. Everyone,
Absolutely.
God bless.
Thank you.
Peace.
Likewise.